Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome back to another live episode of Not Enough Thumbs. Sorry that we are running a little bit late today. Had back to back stuff. Good news is that Rhiannon is going to be home tonight. I have some really interesting movies for this week, um, but we've got a few, sort of. Um, Left Behind. Okay, so again, we are talking about we this month's theme is movies with fathers, and I interpret I interpret that title a little bit loosely. So the first movie is 300. um, hey, we have a listener. Thank you for or a watcher, I guess. Thank you for signing on with us tonight. 300's got dads, military. The nations send their fathers to defend the nation, right? So 300 is about the Battle of Thermopylae historically, but this is taken from, this is based off of a graphic novel. I cannot think of the author offhand, but this was probably much like The Matrix was the beginnings of bullet time as it's known to a lot of people now, where you got the 120 frames per second slow motion shots, evading impossible things. So 300 being a military based action film makes use of a lot of that uh, with sword and shield and spear, and probably some other weapons that show up in the movie. It definitely took after it is definitely fashioned after a graphic novel with the what do you call it? I don't know if it's over the top, but the way that blood sprays everywhere, um, the overall look of the film. There's a lot of shadowy look to all the characters and to the sets in general. A lot of black, kind of cool looking. And the special thing about 300 that was really something that got the attention of a lot of viewers was the physique of all of the actors, and that they had, the extreme shape that they had to get themselves into in preparation for the movie. And of course, while they were filming, they had to uh, get a good pump on, do push-ups, whatever, get some exercise, and get sprayed with Wes on or something like that, in order for to have that shiny appearance to them. And pretty well done. All the battle scenes are really cool. I mean, this movie is definitely a watcher for all of these epic uh, scale battle scenes, and the way they were able to defeat a lot of the Persian army who threatened to take their land was to just funnel them through the Hot Gates, which is just a small opening to the land of Sparta, where they couldn't do anything. They stood their ground for a while until you had a disgruntled person who wanted to help show the Persians the back road, and that was the end of them. Um, this movie is pretty good, pretty timeless. It's from 2006. I saw it in the theater with a friend. Pretty cool on screen back then, and I would probably rate this an 8.5. Um, so go see it if you haven't seen it. There's some really weird parts in there. Definitely good with all the battle scenes. The next film is called The House of the Devil. I'm not sure if there's a father in here. Um, I thought there was when I read the description, so I added it and gave it a watch. Yeah, I really don't think there's a father in here. So, anyway, it's a film from 2009, and I searched specifically for indie horror films. There's just I don't know. I like some of them, not all of them. There's just a different feel to them. House of the Devil from 2009, and you watch it, and it makes you feel like you're watching something from 70s or 80s, and they did a really good job with that, especially with. It almost looks like it was shot with a film camera, um, and the way that they had the credit scene, very much like the horror movies from a couple decades ago. You have this struggling college female student, struggling for money, and so she finds this babysitter ad, and so she's hired on with this family. You learn that it is a husband wife, appears to be, and she's not watching after a kid, but after the husband's mom, and they the way they set it up, or the way they introduced her, was that um, she probably was not going to see the mother. She keeps to herself. And the other thing about this woman, about this young woman, the college student, is that she gets anxious pretty easily and is a little on edge. And so she's in this house by herself, and it's kind of a creepy looking house. So she gets a little bit scared, and she wants to go see if the mother's okay. I don't think I want to go beyond that as far as the details go, but I think the film was pretty well done. There's a lot of cool camera work, and I think the actors were pretty convincing with either their fear or their uh, their malintent. Pretty interesting watch. It's kind of what I expected from an indie film, and I did enjoy watching it. So I would probably rate it a 7.5. Um, it's a pretty generous rating with all of the horror films that I do enjoy. Okay, next one. Also, I thought it had a father, but I don't think there was a father inside. So it's called Antiviral, and this concept is really out there. And again, it's one that I would expect from an indie horror film. I thought it was shot pretty well, and you were really drawn to the characters, wh- which is which is great on their part. The concept of the story is that the trendy thing to do was to go to this place. I can't remember the name of this place. It's a medical facility, and you get an injection of a celebrity's sickness, whatever it may be. Could be the cold, it could be a more exotic illness. And so people go there so that could become sick and feel terrible. Uh, that's weird. I don't. I kind of think of Black Mirror that jumps into the not so distant future, and they take some concepts that we see now into something that seems believable. But this movie, uh, I think they, I don't know, I wouldn't think that this would become a thing. It'd be really bizarre if people thought it was cool to get sick. Um, but yeah, that's what it was. And there was also this butcher shop where this was the really gross part. They harvested the celebrities' flesh, I guess, which and people would eat it. That's so gross. Anyway, this movie is really out there, but the the look of the film is very sterile. There's a lot of neutral colors in this film. Um, the apartments are very plain. The medical facility is very plain. A lot of whites and grays. Um, looks really lifeless, I think is a good word for it. So this one was okay. It was just weird. Anyway, that is Antiviral from 2012. Um, yep, I'd probably give it a 6.5 because super weird concept. Anyway, okay. Next up, we have, yeah, it's totally gross. Guest. Um, Thanks for joining. Next up, we have The Ring from 2002. I saw this in the theater, and it was great story, great horror story put to screen. Is it a horror thriller? Yes, for sure. Um, there is this kid who's having these visions, and he's putting them on paper. How is this father themed? The son that I'm just now talking about has a dad that you see later on. So there is a father present in this film. So that is my justification for choosing The Ring. um, okay, so he's drawing these things that he's seeing, and then I actually can't remember how they get later on. They get hold of this tape, and the thing is, you watch the tape, and you got 7 days to live, pretty much. And so the the mother starts to investigate this the story that was on this tape that she watched, and it leads her to the origin of the ring. I don't want to go beyond there as far as the story goes. It is well worth seeing. Um, it does not use jump scares as the primary method of scaring you. There's a lot of buildup of suspense and a lot of good story building. You get invested in the characters, in all of them actually. The main ones being the little boy and the mother, obviously, and the dad. They're not together. They appear to come together later on in the film. It's kind of cool to have the family back together. Uh, what else? I thought the overall look of the film was neat. I say overall look of the film a lot. Um, if you watch a sitcom on TV or a movie on Lifetime, the Lifetime channel or Hallmark channel, or you go to the movie to watch something, they do have a certain aesthetic to it. I think it has a lot to do with what they decide to film the project with, and how the the colors they have on hand that gives it the look that they're after. And so the aesthetic of the ring is really neat. There seems to be a lot of I don't know, really shadowy and kind of a green tint to the film. I think that's something that they actually talk about in the behind the scenes kind of footage about that movie. Really interesting. It's cool to learn about that stuff. How they add to the um, that viewing experience. Again, it's a good story, and no cheap scares. They're all pretty genuine scares, and it's the kind of horror film that leaves you hanging in a good way and makes you want to tell your friends about it and say, "Hey, go see this." The scary person in this is a little girl with long hair that's covering her face. You see that a lot in a lot. I don't know about a lot, but you see this in the movie called The Grudge. The Grudge is full of jump scares. The story is perhaps mediocre, but so I would say, um, yeah, the Ring is definitely worth the watch. I would rate it an 8.5. Let's see here. Next, we have Left Behind. This is from 2014. Oh, IMDb gave it 3.1 stars. That's pretty lame. Um, so a while back, perhaps either in the early 2000s or in the late 90s, I can't remember when it came out, but Kirk Cameron was in a series of films called Left Behind. These are all based on the Left Behind book series by Jerry B. Jenkins and Timothy LaHaye, I think. Rhiannon has read a lot of these books. I read maybe a portion of one. And so Kirk Cameron did his versions of them, and they were pretty good for that time. Some of the special effects were a little cheap, I guess, but the story was really interesting. So the premise of Left Behind. So anyway, this is a remake. I, um, I guess a more modern looking version of this story. The Left Behind refers to the people that are still on Earth after all of the believers in Jesus get taken up into heaven. Literally, just disappear. It's the account in the book of Revelation in the Bible, and so what follows that event is just utter chaos. I don't, it's really hard to imagine, and I think this is one of those films that puts that into perspective. It kind of reminds me of there is educational series called Connections. I wish I could remember the guy's name that talked about this. It was about the advancement of technology over the past several decades. And he briefly talked about a moment in New York where a lot of the electrical grid got shut down for I can't remember if it was on the order of minutes or hours, but how paralyzed people became when suddenly there was no power. So none of the transportation was working. I mean, just complete blackout in the city had a massive effect on people. So some people were stuck, perhaps in the subway, and you imagine being in a hospital being worked on, and then all of a sudden the hospital were to lose power, no lights or anything. What do you do if there's some kind of critical critical moment where you need light? Well, obviously you'll always need light if you're cutting into somebody. Um, and so I mention that because it's chaos is what ensues in Left Behind, where everybody just well, a lot of the folks just flat out disappear. A lot of babies and young children, all the way through adults. Cars crashing, planes are pilotless, and people are just in a confused state as to what could be happening. Some would blame it on aliens. Some called it a terrorist attack. Um, there was one lady in there who thought that all the passengers in the airplane were in on this sting operation where her husband was trying to take her child because her child all of a sudden is missing and all the clothes are left behind. So literally just the bodies are gone. And I guess if they had hardware in their mouth or something or in their heart or whatever, it was all just left there. Um, and so The focus is on one family: a pilot who is the father, the daughter who is in college, and the wife, and their young son, who I would guess is probably 7 or 8 years old. And so the mother and son disappear, and the father and daughter are trying to sort things out. They meet up with this reporter in the series that Kirk Cameron acted in. He was the reporter, Buck, and that becomes one of their friends. The intriguing thing is that the pastor of their church was left behind. And so that was a wake up call for the pastor. Somebody who, and he admitted to just going through the motions and not really believing what he was preaching. But throughout the film, the daughter was the one who was really resistant, really anti God. Um, couldn't see past all of the hardships that people go through, the great losses or natural disasters that people have to suffer through. Um, a lot of times it's said that how can, if God was an all loving God, then why would he let all of this stuff happen? It's a tough concept to handle, but uh, from the Christian perspective, um, we do live in a fallen world. It happened in the very beginning with Adam and Eve, who were dependent on God for a while, and then decided that they were not going to be dependent on God, and that literally cursed the world until Jesus decides to come back. So, pretty cool film. It's one of those. I'd probably classify this in the perhaps faith, religious slash natural disaster because they're both kind of happening at the same time. I like this version of it. I also like Kirk Cameron's version of it. Um, and today, was it today or yesterday? I learned that um, there was a follow on to this with. Oh, I'm so terrible with the actors' names. I think Neil McDonough is one of them, and I forget who plays the pilot. But the subtitle, it's Left Behind: Rise of the Antichrist. And I'm trying to remember where that falls in the books because I believe it's. I can only remember the first two. It's Left Behind, and then Tribulation Force, and then I forget what's after Tribulation Force. So anyway, let's finish off here with this Left Behind that we've been talking about from 2014. Um, I think it's a great watch, um, and I would rate it I give it an 8. Okay, so back to so I started talking about it briefly. It, it's called Left Behind. Let me find out more about this. Um, Dum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Here we go. Where'd it go? It's from 2023, so very recent. Neil McDonough, Mark Bellamy, Stuart Bentley, Corbin Burnson, who, if you've watched Psych, we've talked about Psych before. He's the father of Psych, Psych's dad. There's somebody that's called Celestial. What's up with that? What's up with these single name people? Madonna, Prince, Fergie. Who else is there? Um, okay. So, Rise of the Antichrist, Left Behind, Rise of the Antichrist, from 2023. Wow, this is a low rating too. Oh yeah, Hercules. What's his name? Jim Sorbo. He played Hercules a long time ago. Tim Sorbo. Why is he not here? What in the world? He is in here. Sorbo. Sam Sorbo. Why aren't I? Kevin Sorbo. Oh my goodness. He plays the pilot's role this time instead of Nicolas Cage. Okay. So what you're starting to see here, I don't know. It's been a year or two after everybody has been taken up into heaven. They refer to them as the Vanishings in this film. It's based on the same story. And, the daughter is still kind of grasping, or is really struggling to grasp the concept that this was definitely God. And so it focused on her a little bit and her journey to figure out the truth, what it really is. And you see that the father, Rayford Steele, he's understanding what's going on after speaking with the pastor, and he becomes a believer. And then later on in this film, the daughter also comes to terms with this also, and asks Jesus to be Lord and Savior of her life. And so after she gets the bug, she tries to convince Buck, who's the reporter. And so he's not there yet. But what goes on in this film is the development of the New World Order, kind of a universal government concept, even doing away with all of the various world currencies and combining it into a single form of currency. And I think there was a company called On the Mark, something like that. And it's talking about that they were going to go with that company's technology as a means to, buy, sell, trade, to get around, buy, sell, and trade things, to consume goods, sell goods, instead of cash or credit card and Venmo, all the typical things that we do now. The really interesting thing is that some people are showing some skepticism towards this unified government, and they made Buck was the one that was doing the exploiting of all the stuff that was going on, that the mainstream media is just trying to strike fear in the hearts of the citizens to literally get them to stay home while they sort things out. Really bad place to be. But I just thought it was funny that they mentioned COVID, because that kind of happened over here. I remember driving around because I was so lucky to be deemed essential. There's a bunch of bull honky because everybody's job is essential. Nobody's working for fun. Everybody wants to put food on the table. So again, that was an interesting reference to some recent events. So I thought this movie was pretty entertaining, about as entertaining as the last Left Behind that we just got done talking about. And you see, and now it says it's the rise of the Antichrist, and you see Nikolai Carpathia, one of the books. Hey, Tilly, get out of there. Nikolai Carpathia, who not explicitly labeled as the Antichrist, but he is the Antichrist, and he's in this. There's this meeting that happens with various world leaders, and Buck was there too, including what appeared to be a right hand man, which was Neil McDonough. Neil McDonough played, from what I remember, he played in. Oh boy, what was that? It was a movie about a college football player. I don't think it was Greater. Oh man, yeah, he was a rising star college football player, and this was the Neil McDonough was the older brother. It's another Christian film, really really good. He was also in Arrow. He was one of the main bad guys. He does a good bad guy, and and so he's kind of the right hand man to the Antichrist, and all of a sudden is not the right hand man. I'll let you watch the film to so that you understand what I mean. Nice surprise to kind of find this after having watched the one we just got done talking about, and so I went on to watch it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's cool to see these. The Book of Revelation is just full of prophecy and imagery. Imagery is the perfect way to put it. And so it's great to make films on these things because there's just so much opportunity for artists to be, have some creative liberty and how they decide to portray what happens in Revelation, all the prophecy, all the destruction. Definitely a good book to pull from. So again, that is Left Behind, Rise of the Antichrist from last year, 2023. I would give it an 8. So that wraps it up for this week. Rhiannon will be landing pretty shortly here. Well, I guess in a few hours. So thank you for joining us this week, and we'll be tackling more films. And let's see, this looks like this is going to be our last week of Movies with Fathers. So we'll try to produce a good lineup for you. Hopefully have some recommendations. If you have recommendations, let us know. And we'll see you next time. End stream. Every episode, I'm going to say end stream. End.